When Jasmine Crockett fired back at Trump on live TV, she didn't just defend herself, she exposed how power really reacts when a smart black woman refuses to back down. The tension was already baked into the segment before the camera started rolling. Bright lights, polished table, coffee mugs strategically placed like props in a sitcom. 4 panelists, 1 moderator, and Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett seated stage left, arms folded, expression unreadable. She wasn't there for theater, but everyone knew this was going to be a show. The segment was running behind. The producers were scrambling during the break to cue up Trump's latest rally clip. It had aired just 2 days earlier from Amarillo, Texas, one of his louder campaign stops where the crowd was hungry, and he was feeding them lines like popcorn. It wasn't the first time he singled her out by name, but this time it got personal, on national TV, with his signature slouch and pout. Trump had said, "Jasmine Crockett, I've seen more intelligence in a goldfish. These people send clowns to Congress and then wonder why the country smells like failure." The crowd howled. Someone in the front row held up a sign with her name and a cartoon nose. When the clip ended, in the studio, no one spoke. The pause wasn't dramatic. It was uncomfortable, the kind where you could hear the quiet hum of monitors and a muffled cough from the sound booth. Moderator Glenn Barkley, an old-school journalist from St. Louis with a reputation for staying neutral, finally looked at her Congresswoman Crockett. He said, adjusting his glasses, "You've heard what the former president had to say. Would you like to respond?" She exhaled softly, tilted her head, then leaned forward, not rushed, not rehearsed, just ready. "Look," she began, calm as ever, "I'm not going to entertain the man's obsession with calling women names. If you can smell intelligence, no wonder you're confused whenever I'm around." No smirk, just words, clean and sharp, like a blade. The studio cracked. Glenn tried to stay composed, but even he broke into a chuckle. Across the table, Republican strategist Andy Keller's jaw slackened just enough to be noticeable. The other panelist, a journalist from Phoenix, blinked, smiled, and glanced at the producer as if to say, "Y'all caught that, right?" What followed was a ripple, only not the soft kind, not polite laughter. Yes, but also that silent acknowledgement when someone flips the power dynamic in one sentence. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. After a beat, Crockett continued, "I've worked too hard, studied too long, and fought for too many people to waste my energy on the verbal habits of a man who struggles with truth, grammar, and volume control." Andy tried to jump in, something about decorum, something about how presidents deserve respect. She didn't look his way. "I'm a sitting member of Congress," she said, "not a prop in a rally. Let's talk about policy, not playground stuff." It was no longer just a segment, it was a moment, real, unfiltered, and impossible to ignore. The control room cut to a wide shot. Producers exchanged glances. The camera lingered a second longer on Crockett's face before transitioning to commercial. But the real story didn't wait for the break. It was already out there, replaying, uploading, echoing across every screen. Within minutes, it started with a clip posted by an intern at the station. Raw, slightly shaky footage taken from behind the glass in the control room. You could hear the laughter from inside the studio, but more importantly, you could hear her voice, unedited and unfiltered. "If you can smell intelligence, no wonder you're confused whenever I'm around." By the time the official network version hit their YouTube channel an hour later, the internet had already crowned the moment. Twitter was flooded with variations of her quote, some overlaid on her photo, others turned into memes, one showing her face replacing Wonder Woman's, another with her as a judge in a courtroom, slamming a gavel labeled, "Facts." Then came TikTok. A 19-year-old from Bakersfield lip-synced her line in a parody clip, wearing oversized glasses and a fake congressional nameplate. It hit 2.3 million views by the end of the night. A makeup artist in Minneapolis layered her response over a "Get Ready With Me" video and called Crockett her new moral compass. Even celebrities got involved. Kerry Washington reposted the clip, Ava DuVernay tweeted a single word, "precision." But it wasn't just applause. The clip stirred conversations, fast and sharp. Cable news picked it up in the evening cycle. Local radio shows quoted it out of context. Influencers grabbed onto it like they'd been waiting for someone to say it. Gen Z had a field day on Reddit. The video was dubbed the "smell heard round the world." By morning, Crockett was trending in 5 countries. She hadn't just clapped back, she'd cracked something open. But there were corners of the internet that didn't take it lightly. Conservative bloggers spun it into a narrative of disrespect. Congresswoman Crockett insults a former president with bathroom humor. One headline read, another claimed it was proof liberals only care about zingers, not substance. Fox Nation ran an entire panel about whether Crockett was sinking to Trump's level. The fascinating part: she didn't say anything crude, she didn't curse, she didn't yell. She told the truth and made it sting. The people who knew her weren't surprised. Back in college at Prairie View A&M, she had been the one who shut down a guy's bad joke in the middle of a campus town hall with a single sentence, "You can't throw shade when you live in the dark." Everyone still remembered it. She'd always had the gift of timing, of truth, of knowing where to hit when it matters. By the next day, Crockett's team had 3 phones ringing non-stop. Her communications director, a woman named Zola Merriman, was practically living on espresso shots and group chats. "Jazz," she said breathlessly between interviews, "we have CNN, The View, MSNBC, and a podcast from some Stanford law students who want you as their keynote speaker." Crockett was calm, almost amused. "Are the students paying?" Zola just raised her eyebrows. "Didn't think so," Crockett muttered, "but Zola," she paused. "Seriously, this could be huge. People are finally paying attention, not because of a scandal, but because you said something honest and sharp." The praise poured in, but something deeper started happening, too. Messages from black women in law school, high school debate teams, young professionals who had been told to stay quiet or tone it down. One woman messaged, "You gave me permission to be smart out loud." Those words hit different. It wasn't just the joke, it was what it meant, that intelligence, especially in a black woman, could be defended, embraced, even weaponized, without apology. By the weekend, Crockett's team had to bring in an extra staffer just to help manage press requests. Every news cycle wanted a fresh quote, a follow-up, a reaction to Trump's next insult. And Crockett, she didn't flinch. She didn't throw out a string of new sound bites. She let the moment breathe, even as it kept expanding on its own. But power like that doesn't echo through empty space, it always hits something on the way back. And the next wave was already building. 3 days after the segment aired, Jasmine Crockett walked quietly through the side entrance of her district office in Arlington, Texas. She had a morning of briefings ahead, housing, committee calls, a budget issue brewing in Fort Worth, and 2 in-person meetings with local activists. But Zola was already waiting at her desk, arms folded, eyes tired. "You didn't see the Post headline, did you?" she asked. Crockett shook her head, dropped her bag beside the window. "Nope. You gonna read it to me like bedtime poetry." Zola sighed, then read. Crockett, clever or calculated? It wasn't even the worst one. The Dallas Tribune had one that morning calling her too slick for sincerity. Another editorial hinted she was using her race and gender as a shield from legitimate criticism. That one hit harder than it should have. Jasmine set her phone down slowly, looked at Zola, then said, "I said one sentence, one." "I know." And now, she was either a comedian or a manipulator. Zola didn't respond. She didn't have to. They both knew this script. The rules were different for women like her, and they got even more warped when she dared to push back with confidence. Inside her office, the air was thick with exhaustion, not the kind you sleep off, but the kind that builds in layers, every misrepresentation, every subtle dig, every eye roll disguised as a question. Crockett picked up a manila folder and opened it. Her committee notes were there, neatly annotated, just like they'd always been. She was known on the Hill for reading everything twice and catching things that seasoned aides missed. But now, none of that mattered. The narrative was getting away from her. Across town, her mother Lorraine was watching a replay of the segment on her iPad, watched it 3 times already that week, proud and worried in equal measure. Lorraine wasn't one to show nerves. She'd raised Jasmine alone after her husband passed from a stroke when Jasmine was 9. She was the kind of woman who could stretch $10 across a week and still make it feel like a feast. But this, her daughter becoming a target for people with big platforms and no filter, she picked up the phone. "Baby, I just want to make sure you're okay." Jasmine paused for a beat before answering. I'm good, Ma. Just tired of dancing around nonsense. Her mother hesitated, then softly said, It's not nonsense to them, Jazzy. Some of these folks want to see you rattle. Don't give them that. I'm not rattled. I didn't. Some of these folks want to see you rattle. Don't give them that. I'm not rattled. I didn't say you were. Just hold your frame. You always had it. That stayed with her. Back at the office, a senior staffer knocked twice and stepped in. We've got MSNBC calling again. They want a 10-minute sit-down tonight. Zola groaned. It's the third time they've asked. Should we push again? But Jasmine looked out the window. Her own face was staring back from a bus stop across the street. Someone had printed her quote, slapped it on a graphic, and put it up as part of a grassroots fundraiser. She looked unbothered, fierce even. But it felt like a version of herself caught mid-performance. I'll do it, she said. Tonight. But I'm not going to let them trap me into being a headline again. Then what are you gonna say? Jasmine turned around. I'm going to tell the truth, and this time, they're going to have to sit with it. But truth rarely lands soft, and she knew what was coming next wouldn't be praise. It would be personal, loud, and full of teeth. By the time Jasmine sat down in the MSNBC studio that evening, Trump had already responded. Not through a press release, not through an official campaign statement, but through a 90-second video posted to his Truth Social account. Recorded on his plane, backlit by golden leather seats and a poorly positioned American flag, he didn't hold back. Jasmine Crockett is the new mascot for the radical left. If you want loudmouths and low IQs running Congress, then sure, celebrate her. But I call her out, and suddenly I'm the problem. He grinned, eyes squinting in that familiar theatrical way. She thinks she's clever. I think she's what's wrong with Washington. It wasn't just a swipe. It was a full-blown attack designed to stir the pot and make Crockett a symbol of everything his base loved to hate. By the time the MSNBC segment began, her quote had become fuel for both sides. Right-wing radio called her disrespectful, nasty, arrogant. A few far-right podcasters labeled her a media plant, and worst of all, people started questioning her legitimacy, not her policies, not her voting record, but her worth. The moderator, a younger journalist named Nina Hall, tried to keep it steady. Congresswoman Crockett, the former president, released a video earlier this evening calling you a mascot and suggesting you're representative of dysfunction in Washington. How do you respond to that characterization? Jasmine didn't blink. I responded the same way I respond to all his messages, she said, voice low, measured, with facts. He can call me names all day, but I'm the one actually passing bills, showing up for hearings, and fighting for people who can't afford to attend his rallies. Nina nodded, but her tone stayed cautious. Do you think maybe the viral nature of your comeback distracted from the policy issues you wanted to discuss? Jasmine leaned in. You know what distracts from policy. Nina, a man using his platform to call women clowns instead of debating ideas. I made one sentence, and somehow, I'm the circus. The room went quiet. Even the producer behind the camera stopped moving. I didn't ask for that moment, she continued. I was invited to speak. I responded with the same tone I've received, only cleaner. And now, everyone wants to know if I'm too sharp, too bold, too loud. But let's be honest. If my name was Jacob and not Jasmine, would we be having this conversation? There it was, the undercurrent brought up to the surface, and the audience heard it. After the taping, Nina came over and shook her hand. Off the record, you nailed it. But as Jasmine walked out of the studio into the night air, her phone vibrated nonstop. She didn't even need to look. Zola had warned her it was going to get uglier before it got quieter. The voicemails were coming in, now, from anonymous numbers. One caller told her to go back to your roots and stay out of white folks' business. Another slurred her name on repeat like a curse. Some called her arrogant, others called her worse. But the one that stopped her in her tracks came from a Texas area code. The voice on the other end was male, calm and cold. You've poked the bear, Congresswoman. That's all I'm gonna say. Watch your back. She replayed it once, then again, then forwarded it to Capitol Police. That night, in her hotel room, she sat on the edge of the bed, her TV muted, city lights pressing through the blinds. The world outside was loud, opinionated, entertained. But in here, it was just her and that creeping thought. What if this isn't about what I said, but who I am when I say it? But her doubt was cut short because the next call wasn't a threat, it was someone she never expected to hear from. And this time, the message hit different. She was still staring at her muted reflection in the hotel window when the call came through. The name lit up her screen, Franklin G. For a second, she froze. Congressman Franklin Garrison wasn't just a colleague, he was old-school Republican, 67 years old, Navy vet, longtime representative out of Montana. They'd sat on opposite ends of the Judiciary Committee table for 2 years. He once called her a spark plug with too much voltage, not unkind, just typical Franklin, blunt and backhanded. She picked up. Congresswoman Crockett, he said, I just wanted to say you handled yourself well. She raised an eyebrow. That's so. I don't care for the name calling from either side, frankly, but what you said, the truth, it needed to be said. And you said it better than most. She paused, surprised. That's unexpected. He chuckled. Well, I'm full of surprises. Just don't tell my base. Then, after a beat, he added, don't let this noise wear you down. You're more than a moment. Don't forget that. The call was brief, but the words clung to her thoughts longer than she expected, not because she needed validation, but because it reminded her that somewhere beneath the noise, some people were still watching with clear eyes. But that didn't stop the flood. When she returned home to Arlington the next morning, the backlash was no longer digital, it was physical. Her district office had received 2 suspicious packages. One was filled with glitter and fake poop, the other was more serious, thick manila envelope, smeared writing, no return address. Inside was a single printed message. Next time, keep your mouth shut. Security swept the building. Staff were sent home early. Jasmine sat alone in her office, watching officers comb through the mail pile with gloves. Zola walked in quietly, a bottle of water in hand. You good? Jasmine asked. Zola didn't answer right away. Then she sat down. They called my mom, she said. Someone found her number. She answered, thinking it was me. Some guy asked if she raised a political mouthpiece or a target. Then he hung up. Jasmine closed her eyes for a second, her hand tightening around the armrest. This is exactly what they want, to scare us into silence. Zola leaned in. It's working, Jazz. I've got 2 interns who don't want to come back. I've got volunteers pulling out of this weekend's voter drive. And I'm tired. We're all tired. It was the first time Zola let it show, the veneer had cracked. Later that night, Jasmine drove to her mother's house. She didn't call ahead. She just needed to be near her to hear her voice. Lorraine opened the door, still in slippers, hair tied up, eyes weary. You eat today? Her mother asked. Jasmine tried to laugh. You always open with food. Lorraine shrugged. Food makes you strong. Words wear off. Carbs stick. They sat in the kitchen, bowls of gumbo steaming between them. The TV in the background played a rerun of the same panel show. Only this time, a conservative pundit called Jasmine reckless and disrespectful. Lorraine muted it. You okay, Jazzy? Jasmine didn't answer right away. She swirled her spoon, watching okra sink. I'm not scared, she said finally. I'm just tired of having to fight twice as hard to be seen as half as competent. Her mother reached out, touched her hand. You know what your father used to say. They only bark when you're close to the truth. That man didn't lie much. That pulled a real laugh out of Jasmine. Lorraine smiled. You didn't say anything wrong. You just said it in a way they couldn't ignore. And that scares them. They sat in silence after that, the kind that didn't need to be filled. Back at her house later that night, Jasmine stood at her bathroom sink, phone buzzing on the counter. She didn't pick it up, not yet. She looked at herself in the mirror, hair tied back, makeup long gone, eyes tired. She whispered to her reflection, as if rehearsing, you're more than a moment. And she believed it, even if just for a second. But belief wasn't going to be enough, not when the storm was still circling, waiting for her next move. And the next voice to speak up was one she never thought she'd align with. The morning after her visit with her mother, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a call from a name she hadn't seen since a transportation hearing 6 months back. Elliot Brandt. He was a congressman from Idaho. Deeply conservative, almost cartoonishly so, pro-oil, anti-regulation, former cattle rancher. He wasn't the kind to cross party lines unless it was over barbecue sauce. Jasmine hesitated. She wasn't in the mood for another veiled warning or a lecture masked as small talk. But curiosity won out. She answered. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, "I'm sure this isn't the call you expected. I don't usually get calls before coffee from someone who once said solar energy was a scam invented by vegan hippies." "No," he laughed. "Fair. Look, I'll be brief. I was watching your MSNBC interview, of course you were." She said dryly. "I thought it was honest, brave, too." Now, that made her pause. Elliot Brandt calling her brave. "I didn't call to flatter you," he continued. "I called because I've seen firsthand how this game works. I've been in DC long enough to know when someone's getting railroaded." She raised an eyebrow. "You've also been in DC long enough to support every bill that would make it harder for people like me to vote." He didn't flinch. "I won't argue history. I'll just say this. What Trump did crossed the line." She exhaled through her nose. "So, why the call? You looking for a press quote or a clean conscience?" "Neither," he said. "I'm going public today, live on News Nation. I'm going to say exactly what I just told you, and I figured you deserved a heads up." She blinked. "You sure your base won't eat you alive for that?" "Oh, they will, but some of them need to hear it anyway." "You earned that,"